Seneca Lake in the Finger Lakes region in central New York, about 260 miles northwest of New York City, the village of Watkins Glen. Fantastic place to visit anytime throughout the summer. It's Labor Day weekend, the last weekend traditionally of summer. Boating on offer, a little bit chilly throughout this weekend too, and it's also the home of one of the great road courses in the world, Watkins Glen International, and the scene of today's Verizon IndyCar series.
Drivers, start your engines!
Before we get rolling, let's head down to pit lane one last time and kicking things off, Kevin Lee. Kev?
Well, just in the last four, might be in control, but think about it this way. He starts third, and up ahead of him is Scott Dixon. If Dixon were to win today, he could control the championship with bonus points. Newgarden can finish second in the final two and still not win the title, so watch the run into turn one, Jan.
Exit Gateway, that was a big loss of points for him. He feels that by stalling in the pits, he lost 20 championship points. He now is 42 back, and he's going to be on the hunt. Katie?
Jan Will Pappas, the Firestone Fast 6. He's going to have to work his way up to his teammates from 8. He's going to need a miracle to beat them at their own game today in order to keep his championship hopes alive. Robin?
Well, let me do this. Podium's a victory. He's been as consistent as you can be, and he's 43 points out of the lead in 4th place. So no more Mr. Nice Guy, no more playing it safe, no more I'm just going to finish in the top 4. He's got to win some races. He's got to get aggressive. He knows it. He starts 9th today, so keep your eye on car number 1.
And Robin,
Kevin? Lee, sorry.
He loves this place. He really does, and I think Pagano will be a contender today. It's time to take a closer look at this 3.37-mile historic Watkins Glen track. T-Bell, take us round.
Well, we're here west central New York, and turn 1 at Watkins Glen is very fast, but it also offers a passing opportunity. But you can't go 4 wide here, as we see a replay from last year. Several cars getting turned around on the first lap, and that exit curb is big, it's wide, and you can use it. There are no track limits here by the rules this weekend. As we get to the inner loop, there's a ton of curbing that you need to use for a quick lap time, but it has been raining and water can sit in the grooves of the curb. This was Friday practice. Max Chilton taking a little too much of that real estate. And then this is the boot. Big entry speed coming into the toe, which is a downhill entry, and then a very steep uphill arcing 180-degree corner. We're looking at turn 9, an off-camber left-hander. This was Hinchcliffe in turn 8. A little too early on the throttle, didn't hit anything. Danny Sullivan style there, and then this is Graham Rahal. And this is the trickiest corner because every other corner on the track is cambered, it's fast, but that one is slightly off camber. A lap around here is huge commitment, physically very demanding.
Looking at the track as we're going around here, what we have is really, Townsend, worst case scenario. It's too dry for these rain tires and not, or too wet for the rain tires and too dry for the slicks.
So, we congratulate once again Alexander Rossi on his first IndyCar career pole position. Starts alongside the king here at Watkins Glen. That's going to be an interesting matchup. And then you weave your way back. We showed you this a little earlier in IndyCar Live. Those in the title hunt, those with nothing, absolutely nothing to lose, who can go for it for a good end of season result. Let's continue through the grid.
2 Penske's, 2 Ganassis, 2 Andretti's in the first 3 rows. Further back, it looks something similar. Sebastian Bourdais in the 18 car, coming off that huge accident in Indy, has recovered so well. His pace is very strong, and I think if it gets wet, Bourdais could pull off a real surprise win today.
Watch out for Connor Daly. He had a really good warm-up. He's going with a hybrid setup, kind of wet-dry. Tony Kanaan was good in the warm-up, and Jack Harvey, making his first start, did a nice job qualifying.
Looking further back, Marco Andretti and J.R. Hildebrand and Max Chilton, all 3 of them have been fast at other points this year on the calendar. What can they do from the last few rows?
So there you go. Paul touched on the track conditions. You can see that wet drying, but for the most part, this Watkins Glen track is predominantly dry. That's going to be interesting. All being forced to start on these wet weather tires because the race being declared a wet start.
Well, in the race this morning, or practice this morning on the onboards,
Jack Harvey gives us this view with thanks to Arrow. We've got plenty of other onboards for you today during this 60-lap or 2-hour timed race. With thanks to NTT Data, this is Tony Kanan's view aboard the Ganassi machine. With thanks to Lucas Oil. The Mayor of Hinchtown, James Hinchcliffe, will give us this point of view, which is kind of cool. We've been enjoying that all weekend long. Graham Rahal, with thanks to United Rentals, will give us this viewpoint. And there's going to be plenty going on here today. And the points leader, the Verizon onboard with Joseph Newgarden in the number 2 Penske Chevrolet. And the Verizon streaming car today is the defending race winner. It's Scott Dixon in the number 9 machine, and you can go inside IndyCar all season long. Download IndyCar Mobile only from Verizon. PT, get back to what you were saying.
Well, this morning in warm-up, it was much wetter than it is now, Townsend, and the tires came apart basically in 3 to 4 laps. We got a nice little wet spot right there. You see the guys are trying to get those tires wet, but this is the worst case scenario for these tires. I think you're going to see guys pit right away.
If it was the driver's choice, they would all be on slicks right now. This is effectively a dry racetrack, and any little moisture that you see on the racing line will disappear quickly, and these rain tires are absolutely going to get shredded within 2 to 3 laps.
Yes, and that's what we saw, as you have mentioned, in the morning practice. And there was a lot more water on the track in practice. So after 1 lap, they'll probably be showing lots of signs of wear. But by the regulations, you have to take the green, go by the pits, and then the next time around is the first opportunity legally you can change those tires. But then after that, the whole red-black Firestone alternate primary, that's out the window. Don't need that today.
Oh boy, this is going to be a scramble. This is going to be fascinating. Get ready. It's the IndyCar Grand Prix at the Glen. Alexander Rossi starting on the pole position for the first time in his IndyCar career, and Dixon determined to reduce that 31-point deficit he has to Joseph Newgarden at the top of this championship. Everybody starting on wet weather tires, but they won't be on them for very long. Coming onto the front straight here at the Glen, it's time to bring the action.
Green.
Good start, Newgarden. Look at him on the inside. 3 wide. Newgarden locks up. Can he keep it intact? He does, but here comes Rossi. The pole man retakes the lead.
Look at the field spread out. No track limits. You can go anywhere you want as long as you can hang on to it. Rossi has the point through the S's. I thought Newgarden made a brilliant move. He just couldn't hang on to the exit.
Sato up to second. Will Power and Simon Pagenaud, the teammates together. They're scrambling, trying to get the best line, Paul, into the inner loop for the first time.
Well, you're not going to get through here 3 abreast like these guys are trying in the back. Will Power and his teammates side by side. But look at Rossi. He has stretched out, and Newgarden coming back on Sato again.
Good work there from Scott Dixon as well. Newgarden back to 3rd, then Sato. Here comes Charlie Kimball up into the mix in the green and black car.
And those rain tires, I'm sure, already are begging for relief. This is such high G-forces in the corner, and the tires are going to overheat very quickly.
Helio Castro-Neves ahead of Ryan Hunter-Ray. They climb the hill out of the boot, the toe of the boot, stretch their legs. Here comes Helio.
Helio makes a move on Sato. Ryan Hunter-Ray pops out, gets Sato as well.
There's Graham Rahal now, the next car up on Takuma Sato.
I wonder if Sato's got damage. Look at how slow he's going now.
He's got a big problem. Sato is just flailing.
Massive understeer, it looks like, from Sato. And here we see the difference in setup. Some people opting for full wet, like Tony Kanaan told us. Some people for dry setup. Rossi comes to pit lane.
Everybody's coming.
We'll have to be careful when we release you.
And guys, no engine power is what I'm hearing for Takuma Sato as everyone comes down pit road to get on the slicks.
Busy pit lane. If it was me, I would have taken another lap and had an open pit, but they're all in. Only a couple of guys have stayed out.
Looks like Max Chilton and J.R. Hildebrand.
Now what's amazing about these pit stops is they will not need any fuel, so you'll see how quickly you see a wing change for Alexander Rossi, but they've got to be so careful as some are feeding in and some are feeding out.
Alexander Rossi beat everybody out, then Joseph Newgarden, Helio Castro-Neves, Ryan Hunter-Ray, and then a drag race. Charlie Kimball beat Scott Dixon out, so Dixon lost quite a few spots.
Newgarden had to wait on his teammate Power to get in the box. I think he might have lost a couple positions. He had to sit and hold, and he was in the clutches of a group of cars that came up. But here's the 2 guys that stayed out. They're going to pit next, and they will have a wide open pit, so there'll be a lot less congestion for them.
Let's take you back and show you that first stop and watch Joseph Newgarden in relation to teammate Will Power.
We see Joseph pulling the pit right here. He's right here, and then you're going to see his teammate. He's ready to go here in a second, and his teammate comes into the pits right here. And then he released him to go, but he lost a couple positions.
It was not a productive stop either for the 9 of Scott Dixon.
No, a lot of congestion, but look at this. That's Castroneves has already caught Alexander Rossi, so a terrific outlap for Castroneves as Rossi's trying to get tire temperature, and that's why Castroneves is on reds, the softer compound. It'll take Rossi 2 more laps to get temperature. This is where you have to be careful on slicks. Watch Rossi and Castroneves. They're going to hit a big damp spot right there, and that is treacherous.
Whoa,
Here comes Elio.
Look at the traction Castroneves has.
Inside line, Castroneves gets it. Charlie Kimball is trying to hustle that car, trying to find some traction.
Everybody getting squirrely. Marco Andretti hanging onto it.
So Piggott pulls in very slowly. He must have a problem there.
I think that might be Hildebrand, who's coming off wets.
Hildebrand and Chilton were the only 2 that did not stop, so they've hit pit lane.
So from 6th to 1st in 1 lap, wets to dries, Castroneves in the lead, chased by Rossi and his teammate Newgarden, and Dixon is down to 8th.
And Rossi's on push to pass there, and I think Rossi is in really good shape here. Those Firestone Reds are going to be good, but not for that long. The blacks will really be the tire to have. As long as it stays dry here for Rossi, he should be able to continue to make ground on Castroneves and eventually get by, but Castroneves will make it tough, and now Newgarden has caught up to these 2.
They certainly came in quick. The Reds came in fast. He had way better traction than Rossi on the outlap, but as we see Newgarden, he's chasing down as well.
And so interesting when you talk about that tire battle, and I think in particular when you see Alexander Rossi, who chose to go with brand new sticker black primaries. Remember, Castroneves did not like his car at all yesterday on the primary, so in some respects they were forced to go into the Reds. But I think here, for Joseph Newgarden on the Reds, and also for Castroneves, I like that call. The conditions are tricky right now. Why not go with the softer tires, Kevin?
You mentioned Takuma Sato had to come in because he had a power problem. He stayed in the pits for a minute, went back out. They're still trying to diagnose it, but he's just been told by Ziggy Harkis on the radio, it's a wastegate problem. We're trying to work on it, but stay out for now. And one of the Ed Carpenter cars is slow right now, and that's Spencer Piggott.
Not sure if he spun on that very wet section of turn 9, but he's back underway.
And that turn 9 section, Townsend, is exactly the reason why race control declared it a wet start. Here's the Piggott incident.
Well, here's the issue. You're on a perfectly dry racing line, and then you come to this section where it's a little bit off camber and very difficult to see the track surface. Nice job from Piggott to keep it off the wall. I raced here 2 months ago in sports cars. It was the exact same issue. That's the last spot on the track to dry.
Let's take you back and have a look at the start of the race. Watch the orange and white car. Championship leader Joseph Newgarden on the inside, locked it up and just lost it there. Scott Dixon went backwards off the start. He got overtaken by Takuma Sato, and then Charlie Kimball, his teammate, was starting to hassle him as well as they climbed the hill. It was good going from Takuma Sato early on.
Watch on board with Newgarden. That initial brake application just overloaded the fronts. I think he did a great job to make the corner. Just gets on the exit curve as Rossi has the power on the clean part of the track.
It's a perfect over-under mover over by Rossi. He just tucked underneath, got the drive off the corner as Newgarden was on the curb, slipping and sliding. But I'm really surprised how conservative Dixon was on that start.
Race leader Elio Castroneves to the tune of about 1.5 seconds, so it's a really positive opening stanza. However, the guy on the move is Simon Pagenaud. He is up 6 places from his original starting spot. Keep your eye on that Menards machine for Team Penske. It's a crucial day for Simon to score pole and to score big.
Another guy on the move is Ryan Hunter-Reay. He had a terrible warm-up session in the rain this morning. He's going to get some pressure here going up the hill from whoever was behind him right there. But look at this. It got Dixon going to make a move right here to the outside, forces him to the outside.
Hunter-Reay on the button, try to defend. Hunter-Reay on the harder black compound, Dixon on the softer reds.
Exiting the inner loop.
Dixon's been the fastest man by far all weekend. He's had a bad first 2 laps. He's fallen back now to 4th, so he's got to start marching forward and take control of the weekend again.
So up and running here at the Glen. racing lap 5 of 60. By the way, in case weather does come into play today, it's the 60 laps or 2 hours, whatever comes first. Just a quick reminder that you can watch every IndyCar on NBC Race Online, on tablet and connected TVs as well, with the NBC Sports app. If this is not in your software arsenal, it needs to be. Download the app or find out more at NBCSports.com. As we welcome you back to the Glen, I know watching non-stop, you didn't miss a thing. You saw it there. And James Hinchcliffe, unfortunately, the Schmidt-Peterson machine has run into some significant problems. Needed to be towed back to pit lane.
Sounded like on the radio he did an upshift and then it did a downshift on its own. We'll get a radio here and an in-car.
Down to second gear.
Oh, that's no good. That's no good for the motor either when it over revs like that, because there's no control.
That was on the upshift from second to third, and you could see on the indicator it went to first.
And it died. Yeah, copy. We'll see if we can get it towed back. It looks like there's some sort of issue with the gear stack. If we get it back here, we'll see what we can do. Copy.
And what he was describing was when he went to go to fourth gear, it selected first gear. That's why it sounded as bad as it did. And they are in the process right now of trying to replace the gear stack. They can basically take out all the gears and replace them. Now, at a long racetrack like this, it's possible you could do it in a lap or two. This is not something that'll get him back into necessarily contention, but with a championship and with learning here at this kind of track, they're going to try and get a gear stack in, see if they can fix this issue and get him underway, but it will be laps down.
I think he might have more problems than the gear stack, because when it came to a rest, it puffed a big cloud of smoke out of it as well. You see that tailpipe has smoke, and that was some really high revs.
There's not a whole lot that scares you race car drivers and champions, but when that happens, that even gives you a jolt, doesn't it?
Well, and if it did go into first gear from third or fourth, whatever it was, it can spin the motor way faster than the engine was designed to handle. So, bunch of issues there, unfortunately, for Hinchcliffe, as we see what looks to be clear skies for now, Lee.
Yeah, beautiful overhead shot there of the Finger Lakes District where we are here in central to upstate New York. And there is the up-to-date radar. We are right in the middle there at Watkins Glen, just a little outside the village, the town of Watkins Glen, up on the hillside. And there's some threatening weather coming.
Yeah, you know, to the west, that blob, as it's moving across, the question is, does it come north at all, stay on its existing latitude? Paul, I'm not a weatherman, but I say there's a chance.
Oh, there's always a chance in these mountains here, but looking at Castro Neves, all the moves he's been making in the first couple laps, you gotta think, Lee, that this guy, it's his last 2 IndyCar races of his career. He hasn't won the championship. Every teammate he's had at Team Penske over the last 20 years has won a championship. There's got to be some desperation to get it done.
100%. And look, it's not ideal, but it's not dire. He's only 42 points back from championship leader Joseph Newgarden. Dixon is second, and Dixon's 31 back. So Elio is in a good position, but let's see how today plays out. Look, this is really good. I mean, if you look at points as of now, he'd go into the final race. Remember, double points at Sonoma in 2 weeks' time. If Elio could pull off the win on their position, they finished as they are now, Elio'd only be 24 back. So it's all to play for. And I just can't help but think, what was it, guys? Correct me if I'm wrong. Two or 3 years ago when we went to Sonoma and there were four guys in the mix, maybe 5. You know, there was Will Power, there was Scott Dixon, there was one Pablo Montoya, Graham Rahal, and Dixon was at the bottom of that order, and nobody was talking about Scott. Those double points on offer, and all of a sudden, there we were crowning Scott Dixon as the new champion.
I don't think
it's wide open.
I don't think any of us will make that mistake again, because year after year, Dixon, despite poor starts to the season, despite challenges with the equipment, he is always a factor, and on these 2 last racetracks, he is very, very strong.
Before getting back to green, let's get a quick word with James. And we heard on the onboard, it sounded really bad when that went in the wrong gear.
Yeah, about lap 2, I started having problems getting into 4th gear. I would kind of rev off the limiter. It would skip the gear sometimes. It would clunk in. So I knew we had a little bit of a problem. And then coming out at a turn 8 there, top of second, shifted for third, and everything messed up in the gearbox and went down to 1st gear. And think did some pretty big damage to the gearbox and may have override the engine as well. So it's really too bad. You know, we didn't have the best qualifying, wasn't the best weekend for us, but we were confident we could, you know, pull something off in the race. Good strategy, smart decision. So, you know, tough for the electronics guys, but we'll bounce back in snow.
How about conditions now, especially turn 9? Is that better now?
I mean, turn 9's still the trickiest part for sure. It's the wettest part, but you know, you could tell from the out laps that it was going to be everyone diving into pit lane in that first lap. So set up a little bit of excitement there for all the crew guys, and who knows, there could be still weather coming. So this race might still have some things thrown at these guys.
All right, so you have to enjoy it here from pit lane.
Tough one for James Hinchcliffe, who was placed 10th coming into this second to last race. Ready to go racing again here at Watkins Glen. Let's do it. First caution of the race over.
Guy who's ready to go racing is Newgarden. He's right on the back of Rossi, but a really nice start by Castroneves.
Keep your eye on that white and blue NTT data car for Scott Dixon running fourth. Can he make any inroads on the guy he's fighting with for the championship? RHR, Ryan Hunter-Reay, Simon Pagenaud, Charlie Kimball as they climb the S's.
Scott Dixon is right there on the gearbox of Joseph Newgarden in the orange car. Dixon in the blue and white. Newgarden defends, Dixon to the outside.
Tough to go around the outside here, Paul, under the inner loop, but he's already cleared him.
Not for him. That's the second time he's done it in this race. So now he has gotten ahead of his championship rival. Now he's got to chase down Castroneves.
Penske, Andretti, Ganassi, 3 different teams, top 3 positions.
That was done with no push to pass because it's not available yet until after the first lap either. So that was a really nice pass by Scott Dixon.
I just can't help but think, as I was watching practice and qualifying yesterday, how good it is to see IndyCar back at Watkins Glen. Of course, the series came back last year after a multi-year absence, but it is terrific. And in the dry, folks, these cars are lapping at over 145 miles an hour average lap speed. They fly around here.
They really do, and I know Will Power there in the Verizon number 12 wish he was flying around here a little faster, because right now he is buried way down in 13th, and after a disastrous opening lap at Gateway St. Louis last weekend where he crashed on the first corner, Power really needs to make something happen here. Now Bourdais is making a move up the inside of Power. There goes, sorry, that's Ed Jones, Bourdais' teammate.
He was on push to pass too and was really slow down into the corner. So I don't know if he's got a handling problem or something wrong with his car, or a full wet setup. He's on push to pass again by himself. So something odd going on here with Will Power.
And odd going on for Simon Pagenaud as well, as he had to gather that up just to make the inner loop.
I wonder if all these Penske's just banked on a lot more moisture being on the racetrack for the first start, because now Connor Daly is all over the back of Pagenaud and coming very strong. Joseph Newgarden, a Penske driver, looks to be perfectly fine on pace up front, but further back his teammates are struggling a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you can do a multitude of options. You can go a dry setup, you can go a partial dry, softer, a little bit less wing, you know, soften everything, or go really soft. And those are the options you have. We spoke to Rossi before the race, and he said, no, I'm going full dry setup. That's the way I like to go. Hunter-Reay locks up a little bit as the car, black and green car, took a look down the inside of him.
It's Charlie Kimball.
And you're talking about, Paul, the different choices you have in setup, and you also said how great a pass that was by Scott Dixon. They chose to go with a little bit of a wet setup, but with less downforce. So if you see cars that have gone, because you want more downforce in the rain, you want less downforce in the dry. So Scott Dixon in particular, as you see some of these Penske's that are buried, my guess is they've gone with a little bit of rain downforce. That slows you on the straightaway and much more difficult to pass.
Well, Connor Daly's got a run on Pagenaud right here. He was on push to pass.
Kimball and Hunter-Reay side by side, headed to the inner loop, and Charlie Kimball executes that nicely. That's the fight for a top 5 position, and Kimball is there.
Charlie Kimball just absolutely pulling away from Hunter-Reay. He's had a nice weekend going. Teammates to Scott Dixon. And wouldn't it be great for Dixon if he had a teammate for once up in the mix in the top 5 to help him out?
The opposition in the championship, exactly. Charlie Kimball with just the one IndyCar Series start. Of course, that was last year, and he had a 6th place finish. Look for Charlie to be strong again today, but it's Helio Castroneves out in front. What a motorsport marathon we're enjoying here on NBCSN. And tonight, the Labor Day weekend tradition returns. It's throwback NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series racing from historic Darlington Raceway. Tonight, 60s, right here on NBCSN. So we kick the day off with Formula One. We've got Verizon IndyCars from the Glen right here, right now. The countdown to Darlington, less than 4 hours away. It is a super day of motorsport viewing. 3 historic racing venues. And today at Monza, got things going. Wasn't the most thrilling race. Certainly this one here is a lot closer. That's for sure. And Helio Castroneves in control. He's got a lead of over a second over Alexander Rossi, who's doing well. But Scott Dixon starting to eat into the deficit there to the Andretti Autosport driver. Joseph Newgarden, Charlie Kimball. That's just top 5 at the moment.
And Lee, I think this is the point where the red, softer compound tire should start to degrade and give an advantage to Alexander Rossi, who's on the harder black sidewall tire. The drivers were saying that the black tire they thought was the tire to have for the race. Again, with this being declared a wet race to start, the tire rule is out, so you can run any compound you want. And we'll have to see what Scott Dixon does at the first round of pit stops. His pace, Paul, looks pretty good on the reds. He could be really strong on the blacks.
Well, his pace has been really strong all weekend. I think he's got his car dialed in really well, and he's probably got better tire management than the other guys on reds. He's eating away a little bit at Rossi, but not enough to really get close to even try to push the pass.
So everybody pitted on lap 1 to get the wets off the car. We're 13 laps into this stint. We think that a full stint is going to be about 16, 17 laps. So that makes pit stops right around lap 18, 19, 20 in that range.
More drama for Takuma Sato. This happened on the opening lap of the race. And perhaps, Kevin, it's the same problem coming back to plague him.
Yeah, they've been trying to sort out that wastegate problem. They've been working on it, and there's, at best, it never was going to be good enough. But now Sato is just going to pull over. And that's going to bring us to a full course yellow. And we were within about 3 laps of a lot of the leaders getting ready to come in. So we'll see if they go ahead and pit now.
Well, most certainly, I would think you're going to put on another set of tires. It's going to be a crowded pit lane and a wet pit lane. So it's going to be very, very tricky.
Pretty interesting situation for Marco Andretti, who pitted on lap 13, and I would imagine will stay out here and be close to back on the same strategy as the rest of the field. So that could really mix things up.
If you're thinking that you've been watching action at Watkins Glen for a long time and how good the Glen looks, as Takuma Sato will be rescued from the whole Matro safety team. You know, since 2010, there's been $54 million in capital investments in facility improvements to this place. It just keeps getting better and better. And even back in 2015, it was a $12 million repave of the racing surface. So never resting on their laurels here at the Glen, and Michael Printup and his team just do a terrific job.
It's a beautiful place to come race, and I think what's really cool about Watkins Glen is with all of the investment, it hasn't lost its character.
Exactly.
It's the same beautiful rhythm, the flow, the undulations, the elevations, and so they've really enhanced the fan experience, but they haven't lost the character of such a fast and demanding racetrack.
So time for the drivers to regroup here, grab a breath, reset, refocus, assess that second run after the conclusion of the first caution.
Think about this. Pits are open. They'll come to pit lane on slicks. The question is pit lane still wet at all? It could be dicey on the concrete.
That's a good confidence-boosting stanza and passage of racing for Helio Castroneves. Let's go. Action on pit lane. We start with Katie.
And Ryan Hunter-Reay will be the first to pull into his pit box on my end of pit lane. He's been battling some terrible understeer in turn 1, so he's been using his rear bar to adjust that. Here on pit lane, the crew is going to give him a half a turn of front wing in Firestone Reds. Jan?
And this is really interesting because Alexander Rossi, look at that. He's putting on red sidewall alternates, and I can tell you that Dixon is going with blacks. Kevin?
Up front, all the Penske's look like they're going with blacks, and a lightning quick stop for Helio Castroneves. Beats out a charging Alexander Rossi. Castroneves maintains the lead.
Great stop to Ryan Hunter-Reay.
Not a great stop for Scott Dixon. He lost 2 positions again on the pit stop exchange. He made it up, and now he's dropped back again.
And Will Power as well. There's the race off pit lane. Helio Castroneves just got out ahead of Alexander Rossi. So the big winners there, right there. Captain America, Ryan Hunter-Reay, and Will Power gaining multiple positions on that stop. Resetting the field. There's been some big winners, big losers off pit road after that last cycle of stops. You see Spencer Pigot at the front of the field, and here is the rescued and returned Takuma Sato, Indianapolis 500 champion of this year. Just been having problems since the opening lap of the race.
I'm actually surprised that they pulled him back to the pit area because he was so far away from the pits, but he must have pleaded his case and got a tow back.
See the engine cover removed. And Sato qualified 4th, had great pace all weekend, but let's look at Will Power's stop here. Left-hand side of your screen. Didn't look like any big issues there. Maybe they got jammed up on the way coming in and lost some time, but he lost 5 positions on that round. Sorry, gained 5 positions.
Gained 5, yeah. You got to think about that too. How big a deal, PT, is it too, with pitting on that side of the unique nature of Watkins Glen pit lane? You pit and your crew comes from the right-hand side as opposed to typically from the left, and it's also a downhill pit lane.
Yeah, well, he's in the prime spot. He's got the #1 spot from his qualifying last week, so he had to easy out. The guys who have it tough, like Newgard and Dixon, all these guys have to swing out around somebody and watch the traffic from behind. So Will Power's in a prime spot to get out of the pits nice and cleanly, but I think we're gonna go green this time. We got some guys from the back that have moved to the front.
First 5 cars on warm tires. Everybody else will be fighting to get tire temperature that just came off pit lane.
Spencer Pigot with that familiar yellow helmet, Max Chilton, and then J.R. Hildebrand set to go back to racing here at Watkins Glen. Let's go. So Pigot, Chilton, Hildebrand, Marco Andretti, and Jack Harvey all out of sequence, those first 5 cars.
How'd you like to be Jack Harvey as we ride on board in the pink car looking out back? You've got all these champions coming at you. His first road course.
Look at Rossi got a nice exit and he got by Castroneves. So those are your effective leaders, not on track, but in terms of pit sequence. As we look out the back of Jack Harvey's car, he's getting a run on him.
He's going to block Rossi up the inside. Rossi took the softer Firestone Reds for the restart. Remember, that's where Castroneves got Rossi, was on the flip-flop situation.
Hunter-Reay has gotten by as well. Castroneves.
Hunter-Reay also on Reds.
So we know now 100% that your initial lap on Reds is going to be quicker than on blacks.
And does that give you enough of an advantage to maintain position as time goes on when the blacks come into their own? It's not enough. That was evident on that last run with Scott Dixon and with Helio Castroneves. Here we're looking back at Alexander Rossi again on Jack Harvey.
Nice clean move down the inside. A little bit sideways for Jack Harvey.
And Rossi and Hunter-Reay are really showing an Andretti strength here. Once this cycles through, Rossi and Hunter-Reay will be first and second in this race. They've got to remind themselves that Jack Harvey last pitted on lap 12, so don't take too much of a risk as Hunter-Reay goes up the inside, because eventually Harvey's going to have to pit anyways.
Significant news of the week is that Andretti Autosport staying with Honda for the 2018 racing season. So good stability, good consistency there for the team moving forward. Tony Kanaan trying to do something on Simon Pagenaud there. Coming up through the S's, let's ride with TK.
Double draft here. He's got a lot of straight line speed. A little lockup by Bourdais and right in front of those guys, so he went really deep, held off both of them.
And where you have to be careful in side-by-side situations in these conditions is the offline driver is in the wet still on slick tires. So it's a lot like marbles late in the race. In this case, it's moisture.
Speaking of that, we do continue to monitor the radar. It looks like the cell has moved further south and around. It may just miss Watkins Glen.
And Dixon has gotten around Newgarden, and Newgarden is under threat from Graham Rahal. So in that lap, we missed it. He got him going up into the bus stop. So he has gotten back around. So that is key right there.
Turn 9 is starting to dry out.
Think about this. With Andretti pitting on lap 13, Rossi and Hunter-Reay on 15, they all have to make 2 more stops, we think, under these conditions. Andretti would be legitimately running 1, 2, and 3 as Rossi goes up the inside of his teammate, Marco Andretti. But Marco Andretti is legitimately battling for position right now.
Let's have a look at Ryan Hunter-Reay on Helio Castroneves. First lap after the end of the caution.
Right on board with Newgarden. And I agree with what Jan Bika said earlier. I think they've just gone with a lot of downforce, expecting rain with Team Penske because the straightaway speed is suffering.
And Tony Kanaan has gotten by Simon Pagenaud. So like you said, I think these Penske cars are on high downforce, and a lot of these Honda guys are on a kind of a medium downforce setup, and they've got good straight line speed.
Rossi in the Napa machine for Andretti Autosport is the man on the move. Max Chilton is the next one on his list.
Max Chilton's been here all week long. He was testing a car for his dad, an old sports car, a Zytek, I believe. So he's been here driving, testing all week. So good to see him up front in that James Hunt replica helmet that he's wearing this weekend.
It's a very cool look.
I don't know if you can wear that unless you fully embrace the lifestyle. A newlywed, Max Chilton is. That's going to be a difficult balance as we look to the race radar.
Outside
race on the right, radar on the left. Rossi goes for the move to the outside, and he'll check out. And I'm watching that radar very keenly on the left-hand side. There's a big blob coming, guys. I don't think we can miss that.
Third of the way through the IndyCar Grand Prix at the Glen. And I remind you again that it's the 60 laps or 2 hours. So whether this race is weather affected, teammate on teammate, Hunter-Reay on Andretti. Inside move for Ryan, nicely done. Speaking of Andretti, we want to congratulate our dear friend and motor racing icon, Mario Andretti, who received the Cameron Argetsinger Award for his contribution, his outstanding contribution to motorsports earlier this week in a special evening ceremony at the International Motor Racing Research Center here in Watkins Glen. Of course, Cameron Argetsinger, the man, the late Cameron Argetsinger, the gentleman who brought racing to Watkins Glen. Great story,
And Lee, while we see Alexander Rossi battling on the racetrack, the team is battling to change the entire fuel hose. There was a fuel leak after the last pit stop, so that is the actual fuel probe that was on the car. They have replaced that with a spare. Obviously, that takes a few minutes to undertake. They're changing the rest of the software and the plumbing as we speak. We're trying to see if we see anything on his actual last stop. You can see that the fuel goes in quickly, but they did have significant fuel leakage after that pit stop. That's why they're having to change the probe. Obviously, they're hoping they can get this all finished before we get to his next stop.
Better hope it doesn't go yellow and they come in right away, but I'm actually surprised, Townsend, they didn't just have a whole complete hose to replace it with.
Well, it's a big apparatus to carry around, and with Takuma Sato 4 laps down, I wonder if at some point the team considers
take his.
Yeah. Not sure that you could use your teammate's pit stall, but maybe the equipment for sure.
Did you notice the refueler though? He looked somewhat perplexed, a little bit confused.
Tell you what, Rossi, I'm so impressed with how he's been running since Toronto. He's just really stepped into another level, and he's done some different stuff in his personal life. He's got a new trainer. He's training with the pit fit training with Scott Dixon's guys, and Tony Kanaan uses them. So some changes, a new contract, and man, he's on it.
Watching Jack Harvey here trying to hold off Graham Rahal, Charlie Kimball, Sebastian Bourdais, a bunch of fast Hondas all over the back of that rookie driver.
Let's ride with Graham Rahal for a moment.
See Graham Rahal there using push to pass to draw close enough in turn 1 so that right here. If I get a good exit, boom, right back on the button, and let me see if I can make the run.
He's got to run, but he might get there too soon and have nowhere to go and have to lift out of it. He was on and off of it. See that? He switched it off as he was coming up the hill because he was going to run all over the back of him.
And it's a double move. There goes Charlie Kimball as well. Kimball thought about having a run at Ray Hall, but it was too close. Not enough time left before the inner loop. Spencer Piggott technically leads, but he's about to pit. Alexander Rossi, technically your race leader. You saw it in non-stop. Could you believe it? The quickest car on track, the guy who just set the fastest lap of the race, Alexander Rossi, forced to come in and pit, an unscheduled pit. Jan Beekers, tell us more. What's the story at Andretti?
The situation was we saw that there was some hesitation on the last pit stop, and in fact they did not get all the fuel, so they had to bring him back in. That's why the team was scrambling so quickly. They did change the entire hose, the fuel probe. You could see that the fueler actually had to open it manually to get it filled this time. That's why it was a 12-second pit stop. But the thing that hurts him so much now, he's way out of sequence because he had to pit so early.
And he left the pit box in frustration as well, sideways out of the box.
I would say that if he gets a yellow, he could still make it on one more stop, and he could cycle to the front and luck back into a good finishing position. But pitting under the green, it's so painful. It feels like it takes forever when you have to do that.
Well, that stop did take forever. That was about twice as long as it should have been.
Yeah,
because if he had fuel, it should have been a fairly quick stop, tires only, and it was 12 seconds long, which is a lifetime, as we got jilted in.
He was the last one really out of sequence, so the order is Ryan Hunter-Reay, Helio Castroneves, Scott Dixon, and then Marco Andretti, who's 2 laps off sequence compared to the rest of the leading pack, who all pitted on lap 15. Marco pitted on lap 13. Here is Joseph Newgarden on Marco.
You can see these guys, they have got too much downforce on that car. He was on the push to pass, and he couldn't even pull alongside the Andretti car, who's probably running the same level of downforce as Rossi, so they're just too draggy.
Too draggy for now, but if it rains, Paul, they'll be sitting pretty with everybody else skating around.
And you were speculating about what Alexander Rossi could do, and I can tell you that the fueler had to open, we mentioned this earlier, the fueler had to manually open the valves. They could not rely on the hydraulic part of the probe. So the answer is, yes, the car is full of fuel, but that's why it took 12 seconds. They couldn't rely on the normal procedures they'd have with the probe.
So we'll see. It's just a matter of waiting and seeing what Alexander Rossi can do if, just if, a third full course caution comes out in the remainder of this IndyCar Grand Prix at the Glen. So Hunter-Reay with a healthy 4.5-second lead over Helio Castroneves, Scott Dixon, Marco Andretti, Joseph Newgarden. This is the win, if he could get it, that Ryan Hunter-Reay has needed for a long time. He's well in command at the moment, but we're not quite halfway through this race just yet.
Been a really challenging season for Hunter-Reay. The big crash qualifying at Pocono. Here's Marco Andretti. Let's see if Newgarden can finally do it here. Just has a nose up, but no, Marco closes the door.
Just not enough straight line speed in that Penske car with the downforce level they're running to really pull by. We see guys on the push to pass, and they're popping out right at the top of the hill and going by when they're on push to pass. So just a little bit too much drag on that car.
Charlie Kimball has had a really solid day. Right there on screen, that black and green Ganassi machine. He is ahead of Graham Rahal, Sebastian Bourdais, Tony Kanaan, his teammate, and then Simon Pagenaud make up the top 10. Will Power running 11th.
And Charlie Kimball's team, Chip Ganassi Racing, will be rooting him on hard to get ahead of Joseph Newgarden and help Scott Dixon a bit more in the points as they run right now. Dixon 26 points back. Understand there's a caution has come out somewhere.
Well, like you said, this might cycle Rossi back to the front and get him back on sequence. If everybody else pits now, he's already done his stop 2 laps ago.
He'll only be 2 laps out.
Yeah, so this could put him back in position into the lead again, which is a lucky break for him.
Not sure what the yellow is, but it's full course. 2 waving yellows at start finish. And Ryan Hunter-Reay didn't want to see that. That big gap is going to close up.
Oh.
And there's your yellow. That's Takuma Sato, who was having a number of issues, and
I think he might have spun down there and was just doing a burnout, leaving.
it's possible.
Because he's up and running again. Of course, Takuma was the cause of the second full course caution when he was stranded out on track out at turn 9.
My first thought was, oh, he had a driveline issue, something expired there. But I think you're right, Paul. That might just be tire smoke.
You know, obviously it was some type of electronics problem. They more than likely changed the steering wheel and reset some things and got going again. With the rain, you know, you never know what can happen if you get water and the electrical connections. And we've seen it time and time again when you introduce rain to these cars, some cars end up having electrical problems.
Well, perfect timing for the Sato spin to help Alexander Rossi. If it was in fact a spin, we don't know. But whatever the issue, if it was in fact Sato, that would be very conveniently timed for Rossi.
What are you saying, Townsend?
I'm just saying, it's very conveniently timed.
Yeah.
We have seen it before.
It's definitely odd. Nobody's crashed out. Pits are open now, so nobody's crashed out. We're going to see if everybody takes this yellow and it cycles Rossi to the front. But I got to wonder if that was some team tactics there.
Well, speaking of team, the Andretti Autosport team on the 28 of Ryan Hunter-Reay did a spectacular job last time. Let's see what they can do this time, Katie.
And Lee, he had cycled his way into the lead. He is currently on those Firestone Reds as you see him pull into his pit box right now. The team is going to go into Firestone Blacks. He also wants a half a turn of front wing filled up with Sunoco fuel. Jan?
And Katie, the choice for Scott Dixon is new blacks. So it's very interesting to see as it's so tight on here on the road. Kevin.
Ryan Hunter-Reay is going to beat everybody out. Another good stop for Castroneves. He gets out second on Firestone Blacks. Then it's Dixon. And side by side, Newgarden and Marco Andretti. Marco maintains that position.
How'd you like to be a left side tire changer on this pit lane? Oh my goodness, that's close.
There have been some close calls already today.
Look at Power again, 4 spots. So this Penske team is crushing it for Will Power on pit lane.
That's 9 positions made over the last 2 stops. Watch this. View from Joseph Newgarden. Marco Andretti up ahead. Bunk.
Little chrome horn, nothing major.
A little bit of Paul Tracy style there.
That's just a love tap. No damage.
So we've got Rossi and Piggott kind of back on sequence. Piggott's got a couple more laps less than Rossi, but Rossi's back in the game now. And now Chilton, who's also in the game, started at the back in last place. He's now on sequence in 3rd.
I have to see what everybody did for tire compound, because if you put reds on, I think you're really at a huge advantage on these restarts, as we've seen already. So looks like Castroneves is on blacks, Dixon's on blacks. Looking for anybody that might be red sidewall there.
So there is Alexander Rossi. He gets that caution that he was hoping for to try and get back in the game, so to speak, after such a dominating second stint.
And there I think it's Max Chilton and J.R. Hildebrand both gambling on reds, and I like that call. Nothing to lose here championship-wise. Both these guys need a big result. So take that softer compound and go big on the restart.
Max Chilton has loved racing in America. After leaving Formula One, he enjoys the Verizon IndyCar Series. He calls this place his favorite road course in America.
And check this out. Ed Carpenter Racing has 2 cars legitimately in the top 4 on the same strategy now. 1 stop to go to the end.
Awesome effort from the Fuzzies Chevrolet team. Ready to go racing again. End of the 3rd full course caution. Let's go. Familiar side, Alexander Rossi at the front.
Rossi's got clear sailing now, and he's got some cars that are definitely nowhere near as quick in terms of pace throughout the weekend. It's really Castroneves and Dixon that are back in 6th and 7th that can run his pace. So he's got a nice little buffer here for probably the next 15 to 20 laps.
Graham Rahal working on Joseph Newgarden.
And there's the downforce in the drag that Paul's been talking about. Look at Rahal just motoring by, no problem on Newgarden.
Scott Dixon was able to clear Tony Kanaan there. Actually, Marco Andretti, my apologies. So 1 position gain there for Dixon after the restart. So Rossi, Piggott, Chilton, Hildebrand, Hunter-Reay, Castro Neves, back to Dixon, Andretti, Rahal, Newgarden, Kimball. That's what your top 10 looks like. Joseph Newgarden's going to get sick very quickly of cars just pulling out and overtaking him, and Charlie Kimball runs wide.
Will Power slid by. He got off the track on the curb, and then it's wet. Those curbs are still wet, so it shot him off the track.
And that's some critical breathing room for Joseph Newgarden. He had the Ganassi team with Kimball battling him, and then Kimball's falling another position back. Now Newgarden has 2 teammates. I'm not going to say they're going to race him easy, but it's certainly better to have. There's Kimball into the wall.
Last turn, exiting turn 11, slapped the wall.
And his teammate nearly hit the back of him. As we see, Carlos comes down the inside because he had to check up on his teammate. That was really sketchy.
And Munoz got on the wet stuff outside of turn 1, and Charlie Kimball has got his hands full. How much damage has been sustained on that car?
He's lost 6 or 7 spots in a matter of 3 corners.
That wasn't just a glance either, that was a slap. Bourdais on the inside of Connor Daly. And for Charlie Kimball, who was knocking on the door of the top 10, has dropped all the way to 17th place.
Rossi in 1 lap is already almost to a 2.5-second lead, so he's got a good breathing room here on Piggott.
Watch this. The view from Tony Kanaan to his Ganassi teammate. Bang.
And you could see when Kimball hit that exit curb, there was a little puff of moisture. And that's the issue here. The water can sit in those grooves.
Watching that replay, it wasn't as big as what I initially thought, but it did not help Charlie Kimball. Meanwhile, Alexander Rossi, your race leader. You're watching NBCSN's coverage of IndyCar, brought to you by United Rentals, office equipment rental services provider of IndyCar and proud sponsor of Graham Rahal. And by TireRack.com. Find, deliver, install smarter. Tire Rack. Back at the Glen, Lee Diffie, Townsend Bell, Paul Tracy with you for the action of this IndyCar Grand Prix at the Glen. Race leader Alexander Rossi to the tune of nearly 5 seconds. Back to Ed Carpenter Racing, Spencer Piggott, and then Max Chilton. Now, there's a little bit more detail to strategy when you talk about these guys at the top who are slightly off sequence to the majority of the pack.
Only slightly, though, as we see Spencer Piggott there running in second. Now, he last pitted on lap 23.
Dixon's got to run on Castro Neves.
And the question for Piggott, Jan Binkus, is what does he have to do to make it to the end? What does his teammate there, J.R. Hildebrand, who's in 4th, have to do to make it to the end?
Well, for Piggott, and to answer your question there, sorry, Paul, was that for Piggott, he has to do major fuel save, and that's why you see such a big gap that he's dropped behind Rossi. And for Hildebrand, I don't think he can do it. He might as well just go for it now. He has an extra stop in his future, unless there's a lot of yellow.
So, time for our Chevrolet driver update. And you see on screen there, young American driver Spencer Piggott, who's doing a really nice job in the fuzzy Chevrolet. And we just spoke about his teammate, J.R. Hildebrand. Helio Castro Neves is featured today. And remember, he is in this Verizon IndyCar Series championship hunt. So too his teammate, Joseph Newgarden. So too his teammate, Will Power. So too his teammate, Simon Pagenaud, in the Penske Fest in this year's championship. It's Scott Dixon who is standing alone and standing up and trying to fight the good fight.
Well, it's shaping up so perfectly for a wild finish at Sonoma, because right now Castro Neves has moved himself only 33 points back as they run right now. Scott Dixon would be 23 points back. And again, Sonoma double points on offer as we ride on board with Dixon. And I think this really favors Dixon. If this track stays dry and the track stays green, Scott Dixon could make up several more positions as Hunter-Reay goes to the inside of Hildebrand.
Well, I gotta think that Dixon will make quick work of Hildebrand on the next lap. He's closed the gap big time. He got by Castro Neves on the previous lap at the bus stop, and he is marching his way forward. And I gotta think that when he gets to his teammate Chilton, you would think that Chilton would help him out.
I don't know. A lot of talk that Max Chilton probably not back at the Ganassi team next year. So are you driving for yourself? Are you driving for your future? Or are you driving for your team?
Well, I mean, it all depends on what his feeling is towards Dixon. Obviously, they're good mates. They hang out together. They go to dinners together.
Dixon did go to his wedding.
Well, maybe you're right. But
he did show up. He did fly across the pond to London for the Chilton wedding a few weeks ago. So many factors come into this.
He's got to get past J.R. Hildebrand and Ryan Hunter-Reay before he gets to Chilton, though. Race leader Alexander Rossi continues to stretch his legs. 6.2 seconds out in front now.
And things are looking really good for Alexander Rossi, and that caution that he caught, as you were talking about, was perfect timing for Alexander Rossi. Now he's looking good on hit sequence. Here's what Rob Edwards told him on the radio.
So you and everyone else has to make one more stop now, so we're all doing the same thing from here. And then you need to save fuel as much as you can.
That is the same data that I have reviewed. It looks like he has perfect strategy here. He has to save some fuel, but only one more stop. But here's something happened just moments ago. Another radio conversation saying we're going to pit in 3 laps. Now, that would not make sense for Alexander Rossi. So we're going to go by the earlier as Charlie Kimball's cutting some grass, but it looks like, bar that last radio conversation, that Rossi's in the driver's seat.
It's been a little bit of a wild day for Charlie Kimball, hasn't it? Got off to a great start, but in recent laps starting to unravel just a little bit. We'll see if the driver of the 83 Novo Nordisk machine can get it back on track for Chip Ganassi.
I think the key for Rossi now is to really just to get to that pit window and be the first guy to pit, because we're back on a road course. We've been on ovals the last couple races. You get that pit stop done. If it goes yellow, you're in the driver's seat.
Yeah. Remember, though, the delay on the fuel, right?
Yes,
12 seconds to fuel the car for Alexander Rossi on the last stop.
So he's got to build up a nice cushion and get a nice lead. If it's going to be another long pit stop, having this 6-second advantage is definitely going to help.
As we watch Spencer Pigot running in second right now, he's been talking about losing the tires a little bit, trying to hang on, but he's one of those not saving right now. They're telling him to go ahead and turn up and run as hard as he can. Now I'm hearing some other conversations, even those that pitted with everyone else, still doing a little bit of saving. The idea is save now so you can race hard later. And as far as the Penske downforce level, I'm hearing a lot of, they kind of did the in-between. They went possible wet, possible dry, somewhere in between, Jan.
Yes, and I talked about that Alexander Rossi possibly pitting in 3 laps. The good news is they said on lap 43. So, whew, that's exactly what they wanted. So Alexander Rossi right now looking good.
Hey, Jan, just speaking of fuel, because this did turn into a fuel race last year towards the end with drivers like James Hinchcliffe running out. Are there further amendments and refinements going on at Andretti with that fuel nozzle? Has anything happened, or are they just going to do it manually again?
Well, the case is they were trying to restore, I said hydraulic before, it's by air pressure. There's air pressure that opens that nozzle, so they're going to make an attempt to test that. Here's the problem, Lee. You're only given so much fuel to complete the race. They can't really afford to spill much more, so right now I'll go back and check and see if they think it'll be operational, but the fuel will have to be ready to back that up.
Great stuff. Thanks, mate. Into the second half of the IndyCar Grand Prix at the Glen. It's been a very interesting day for Alexander Rossi. Can he go from pole position to victory lane? We'll find out. You rejoin us right at the right time to see Scott Dixon round up Ryan Hunter-Reay for 3rd place. Good run out of the S's at the top of the hill. The drag race down to the inner loop, and Dixon won out.
And let's see how fast he can close the gap to his teammate Chilton. And if Chilton helps his teammate, the guy that flew across the pond to his wedding, Townsend, so he has just overhauled Ryan Hunter-Reay, and now he's on the back of his teammate.
Well, we know he went to the wedding, but not sure what Scott Dixon might have said at the wedding. So could go either way
or
here.
The quality of the gift.
That's right. That's right.
If Emma Scott's wife hears us talking about this, we'll get scolded next time we see her. But we'll see how this shakes out. It's all about gathering as many championship points as possible with 1 race remaining in Sonoma, California in 2 weeks' time. This guy we ride with is trying to capture his 5th IndyCar Series title.
And as he runs right now, Scott Dixon only 20 points back of the championship lead. And Kevin Lee, we talked about the championship implications. If Dixon's within 20 going to Sonoma, what does that mean for Joseph Newgarden?
I think what we looked at is that he can lose control of this championship. We felt like he was in so much control, but 31 is not that much when you're talking about double points. It's simply this: if your lead is less than, say, 23, well, then you're in a position where if someone like Scott Dixon wins the race and wins all the bonus points, then you can even finish second and not win the championship. And that's where Dixon is at right now. If it finished this way, if Dixon took the bonus points next year and won the race, he would win the championship no matter what Joseph Newgarden did next weekend, or 2 weeks out.
We may even get to see Chip Ganassi crowd surf again.
What we have now is we have Newgarden with Power, who's only a half a second behind him. Do they run in formation? Does Power get the orders now? Hey, Newgarden, we need to run in position here, or does he have an opportunity to pass Newgarden and close that gap for Dixon even more?
I don't think he does get the orders. They're both championship contenders, right? Yes, one's a leader, one's a chaser, but I don't think they do. I don't think the captain would allow that.
Well, and I wonder if the message might be relayed to Newgarden. Hey, Dixon, as he runs right now in third, you know, start turning up the wick here. We need to earn points here. You can't just cruise.
Yeah, here he is. This is Joseph Newgarden. Where is Will Power? Right there.
Right there on his tailpipe. So he's there. No pressure from anybody behind Will Power. So Marco Andretti has gotten by Newgarden. Marco having a good day. He was off strategy, started way in the back, and took that alternate strategy. He's inside the top 7, which would be a great result for him.
And remember earlier, we saw Newgarden trying to make moves on Marco Andretti with the push to pass, but he had too much drag. Newgarden did, going for kind of the rain hybrid setup. So I'm sure right now they're regretting the gamble to expect rain on the track.
Got to think, just because we all know him so well, Will Power, just how badly he beat himself up during this week after what went down at Gateway, spinning on the first lap of the race, crashing and just kissing goodbye so many championship points.
Well, and I'm thinking that Will Power is probably remembering Mid-Ohio earlier, but let's go back, and apparently this is off Twitter. A fan has posted this video as Takuma Sato loops it in the toe and then has to go counter course and 180 the car. Now Rossi is in, 18 laps to go.
And he comes in, Jan, with a 12-second advantage over Max Chilton in second, and Chilton is in.
Yes, and the pit delta, meaning the time he will lose here, is 30 seconds if your fuel flows properly. I've been assured by the team, Ron Edwards says the fuel probe is working properly. It should be disengaged right about here. Yes, it is. A clean stop for Alexander Rossi.
Max Chilton on pit lane means that Scott Dixon is now in the lead, and it's a long stop for Max Chilton, nearly 10 seconds as they got it filled all the way up with Sunoco fuel.
Well, Scott Dixon's got a clear road and about 3, maybe 4 laps more fuel. We got some pressure here. Wow, that was a tricky pass by Pagenaud, but Scott Dixon right now, if he wants to close this gap, he has got to lay down 4 qualifying laps to close the distance on Rossi.
And Rossi has to work furiously here to get tire temperature. Can't afford to lose more spots.
Rossi has come back out on track in 13th place. New race leader, this guy, the 4-time winner here at the Glen, Scott Dixon.
And the entire field is making pit stops already. Ryan Hunter-Reay just choosing the Firestone Blacks for this final stint. Jan?
And Scott Dixon is getting a full load of Sunoco, and he's going with stickered blacks. Kevin?
Leo Castroneves has an easy out, but it's a longer stop for Castroneves. I think they had to put it up on the jack again. The 98, and Rossi goes by Hunter-Reay, and then Castroneves as well. I got screened out a little bit, but it seemed a little bit longer for Castroneves.
Alexander Rossi flew by with a big gap, and that is Castroneves violating the pit exit rule. I think, Paul, remind me what we heard from Brian Barnhart. I think you have to stay all the way below that yellow line.
Yeah, he definitely popped out. We see Graham Rahal now has a run up at the top of the hill. He definitely popped out and went across that yellow line and through like a hole in the track, it looked like. So
let's show you. Car in question, driver in question. Elio Castroneves. This goes
Oh, yeah.
Ray. Wow.
Remember, there's actually a line here, and the transponder has to clear that. But I think if you go over the line that early, for sure that's going to be under review. So we'll have to see how race control treats that.
It will be under review, but Townsend, he did, just like you circled there, he caught the line. See, he's outside the line there, but he got over the transponder. And the way that race control has done it this year, we will only officiate on the transponder. I think he's clean.
But isn't the point of the transponder to keep people from going over the line?
That was a little awkward, and it could be the ultimate escape for Helio Castroneves. So if you cycle this back around, PT, this is looking very strong for Alexander Rossi. Let's go down to the pits.
Will Power has the pit out location. He squeezes around Joseph Newgarden, the championship leader in the orange and white car. He's going to have to get around. Will Power coming out. Final stop for the two Team Penske cars, and Joseph Newgarden about the same time, and it's a drag race to the line, and now we watch how they blend in.
Joseph Newgarden totally overcooked his pit entry. He got the same thing.
Oh, it gets hit hard by Sebastian Bourdais. The championship leader is in huge trouble.
They're all hitting the pit lane exit wall. He hit the pit lane exit wall.
Wow.
And was on the brakes and got clobbered. Marco Andretti came in and did the exact same thing. He slid wide and hit the pit lane exit wall, and this is massive damage.
I wonder if there's water on the track or just cold tires.
It was Tim Cindric, president of Penske Racing, Team Penske, who asked the question, what happened there? Let's have a look from above. So Will Power raced him hard off pit road, but what happens to the championship leader?
He just understeered into the grass, hit the wall, and then the next car came along and hit him. And if we stay on this shot, watch Marco come hopefully into the picture and does exactly the same thing.
You could see a little puff of right front smoke on all three of these cars. We're locking right fronts. Remember, you come off the pit speed limiter, you get all the acceleration, and we'll watch on board. Listen to Newgarden.
You don't realize coming down here, it's very, very downhill. He's locked up. The tire's locked up going in, and just, oh, big hit from behind.
Watch that line. Oh.
And Newgarden's very lucky he didn't get completely walloped as they went on. Look at all these guys. They're in the racing line.
So it wasn't Marco, that was Canaan that hit the wall. His car looks very similar. So this is very, very steep downhill. It's very deceiving. He just locked it up.
And remember, it was Newgarden last week at Gateway swooping across the nose of Power who crashed on the opening lap. Now Newgarden has the mistake.
It's a very, very similar pit exit to like getting out of the pits in Daytona, you know, in the night. And you come in there and you think, oh, I'm not going very fast, and you end up clobbering the Arco.
And if you think correctly about that, PT, guess who did it? It happens to the best of them. Jeff Gordon did it at night, coming off pit road around that 180-degree turn in the Rolex 24 at Daytona. So here comes a very wounded Penske Chevrolet.
Damage all over, front wings broken, rear wings broken. You got to think the toe's out on it.
That was a hard hit on the left-hand side.
Careful stopping here.
And he's entering a closed pit.
And you can hear Tim Cindric saying, be very careful stopping. They thought a tire was also down. So what they're going to do first is they're going to change the rear wing assembly, change 4 tires, and then they're going to decide whether the car is well enough to continue. He slapped that guardrail pretty good, but they're eventually going to have to assess suspension and other issues with this car. What a swing, potentially, for the championship leader with just one more race to go after this.
It is huge. This is monstrous as far as the scope of the championship is concerned.
Tires here, guys. Get the tires.
The driver who has won 3 of the last 4 races and who came into this race with a 31-point advantage may just end today and leave Watkins Glen, New York with a single-digit points lead.
Front wing end plate looks like it's definitely been hit hard and potentially broken.
Now, Newgarden goes on to Reds
See that
with
wing end
maybe
plate?
14, 13 laps to go. And there's some damage to the car, but if it's in reasonable enough shape, it's going to be fun to watch Newgarden. The front wing's still damaged. Question is, do they keep him out, or are they going to just try to stay on the lead lap and come back to pit lane?
Well, on this side over here is something damaged right there as well. So it's pieces flying off the car. So he's got damage somehow on both sides of the car to fix. He's going to have to come in and check that over again, which is going to put him further down. And right now, Scott Dixon is only 3 points behind Newgarden in the points.
If this Verizon IndyCar Series Championship for 2017 hasn't been entertaining enough, can you believe what we've just seen? You've been watching non-stop what's been going on in the #2 Team Penske camp for Joseph Newgarden. A flurry of activity to try and get this car race ready again to keep his championship lead intact. And while we watch that and enjoy the closing end of this race, reminding you the Labor Day weekend tradition returns. Throwback NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series racing from historic Darlington Raceway tonight at 6 Eastern right here on NBC, capping off just a marathon day of wonderful motorsport, Formula One, IndyCar, and finishing it off with NASCAR in the Southern 500. Couldn't ask for anything more. Joseph Newgarden could ask for a good, strong race car to finish off with. Boy, this has been a huge blow for Joseph Newgarden.
Major damage. The floor is broken on the right side. They've obviously got some suspension damage going on the left side, Townsend, a rear wing, a front wing.
Now, speaking of championship contenders, we turn now to our Chevy driver profile. We put the spotlight on a guy who knows what it's like to win a Verizon IndyCar Series championship. He still feels he can get his second one this year if things go his way, and some important numbers there for him. And one of the big news items, if you look at Will Power's life, big picture-wise of late, he has become a father over the off-season at Little Bow. And he has been just the light in Will and Liz Power's eyes, for sure. Cute little guy.
Yeah.
And he'll grow up to know all about his father's legacy in IndyCar and open wheel racing all over the world, whether it be in Australia, in Europe, and here in the United States.
Well, we've got a race on our hands now, boys. Does Scott Dixon go for the layup, or does he go for a slam dunk and try to get some extra points?
I think Dixon's so fast that he'd be disappointed not to win this thing, but it's going to be a great battle as Newgarden gets going. Unfortunately, he lost at least one lap there with the toe length change on the left rear.
And guys, we saw Joseph Newgarden and Sebastian Bourdais involved in those incidents on pit lane. Tony Kanaan also involved in a pit lane incident. He smacked the wall. Check this out. This is his left rear tire has completely come apart. He also had some suspension damage. And guys, I just heard over the radio, he is now done for the day.
Just been a weird year for Tony Kanaan.
Heads up and pit out.
3 unforced errors. He had the Toronto crash, he had the warm-up lap crash at Phoenix, and now this.
All right, this is what Scott Dixon was waiting for, rubbing his hands together because he was going to have to find it on track to try and catch Alexander Rossi. Now he's got a clean, fair shot. Ryan Hunter-Reay's not done with yet either, and there are only 11 laps to go here at the Glen. Let's get back to it.
11 laps is a long way to go. It's a long track, so plenty of time. We know that these two guys are the fastest guys of the weekend, so we've got a great race here.
Andretti, Ganassi, Andretti, Penske, and Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan with Graham, who always runs well here at Watkins Glen. He loves this place too.
And Castroneves is surrounded by 5 Hondas. Castroneves, the lone Chevy up front there. And this will be fascinating to see what Scott Dixon can do with Alexander Rossi. And Rossi has just been so dominant, the fastest lap of the race. And his pace over a long stint has been sensational. Look at Connor Daly trying to mix it up with his teammate.
Guy who really benefited from that yellow was Max Chilton, who's sitting now back there in 6th position. So that would be a great result for him. But Power behind him, Andretti, Kimball. Our 2 leaders getting away from Ryan Hunter-Reay already halfway around the first lap of green, and they're getting away.
You know, back in the day, before Alexander Rossi went to Europe and his chase to Formula One, he wanted to race here, but there was a New York state law where you had to be of a certain age before you were allowed to race on the Watkins Glen International circuit. And he always wanted to race here. And it wasn't until last year when he got his first shot and he said, this is one of the best tracks anywhere in the world. It's a classic. It's old school, right, Jan?
Yes, it is. And Lee, you would not be surprised to hear that the Andretti Autosport team for Alexander Rossi has been cheerleading him on the radio, saying, Alexander, you were the fastest car even in fuel save mode. You have got this. And of course, this extra caution really helps Alexander Rossi, because at one point he had to fuel save. Now he does not.
And for Alexander Rossi, he's been the most efficient on push to pass. You see him on the button there. He has 110 seconds remaining. Nobody else has anything close. Even Scott Dixon, who historically is very conservative on push to pass, only has 72 seconds remaining. So Alexander Rossi in a great spot up front, and every lap for Rossi must be blissful. He loves this track. He spent all the years in Europe working on Formula One. To come back here and to lead in dominant fashion, he's got to relish every second of this.
Scott Dixon obviously chasing, but I don't know how much he's chasing with urgency, Lee. If really he feels that he has to win this race, because right now, with Newgarden basically out of the running, this has really put him in a good spot for next week.
Oh, it's going to be sensational, guys, when we get to Sonoma in 2 weeks' time.
The story of the day is Joseph Newgarden coming to grief, exiting pit lane, crunching his car, and he is all alone. Yes, he's all alone on track. He's all alone at the top of the championship, but now only by 3 points. From 31 to 3, the second car in shot is the guy chasing, and now Scott Dixon has a very real shot at a 5th Verizon IndyCar Series title. Alexander Rossi, the race leader, but I tell you what, it's by a much smaller margin. We'll tell you about that in a moment. And we want to congratulate the Mazda Road to Indy 2017 Championships, Oliver Askew in USF 2000 in Pro Mazda, Victor Franzoni and Kyle Kaiser, 2017 Indy Lights champions. Congratulations, guys, and we look forward to watching your path and where you go in the future on your Mazda Road to Indy. Kevin, tell us what's going on.
We're going to have to wait and watch. They were telling him just to be very cautious when he went out. No need to push hard. We're simply trying to turn laps, so they're going to do some more body work as you see him on the right rear cutting off a portion of that wheel cover there, something that may have been impacting the tires. So at this point, it's just making sure he gets home safely. His only chance of picking up any spots is if someone has a mechanical, and it's going to happen pretty soon for Newgarden to advance in.
Yeah, that floor is broken at the back, and it's flexing that wheel pod back into the tire, and you can't have that for very long. Ultimately, it will cut the tire down.
Watching Newgarden's mistake again earlier, and you just can't emphasize how tricky it is in these cars on cold tires. He just overcooks it, and then insult to injury, just gets completely rammed from behind by Sebastian Bourdais, who also got in too hot. But I think Bourdais would have made the corner, no problem, but he was sliding through that corner and had nowhere to go.
Pretty good move by Spencer Pigot. He ran off the track to avoid hitting Newgarden, so he ended up right out in the middle of the line and could have got hit by somebody else as well.
The other elements that we have been remiss to mention, it is extremely cool here today. There is a breeze making it quite cold. Earlier today, it was... I got some messages when we were doing Formula One. Bring your jacket to the Glen. It's bitterly cold. And so then you got that very steep downhill run on pit exit here. So all of those factors influencing what happened to Joseph Newgarden.
Well, watching Newgarden come down for that last repair. Remember, these cars are basically like F-16s on the road. How would you feel if you were Newgarden, you'd see the mechanic holding a giant sawzall to make adjustments to your car and try to keep you in the race?
And that was definitely a NASCAR tool, not one you would want to use on an IndyCar car regularly. But Scott Dixon right there. But these guys, Rossi's been so quick all weekend, turning quick laps, but Scott Dixon now has just turned the fastest lap of the race while we were at commercial break. So he wants it, but how much risk is he willing to take?
And bigger picture view of this Verizon IndyCar Series Championship, folks. We've told you many times, 31 points was Joseph Newgarden's lead over Scott Dixon coming into this second last round and race. Now, as they run, there's 36 points, 34 points, I should say, blanketing the top 4. This is going to be insane going to Sonoma.
Going to Sonoma, but it's going to be insane for the next 5 laps. You have the most successful IndyCar driver in the last decade going against the hottest young prospect coming up through the series with Alexander Rossi. And I think Rossi just is loving this. Sure, he's under pressure from Scott Dixon, but what a great chance to prove yourself with an awesome Andretti Honda in terms of performance going up against the Ganassi Honda with Scott Dixon.
4 to go around the Glen. These guys are in a league of their own. There is almost a 5-second gap from Dixon back to Hunter-Reay. It's been a really strong run today for RHR and the Andretti squad. They run 1st and 3rd. Elio Castro-Neves is back in 4th. And Graham Rahal is in the top 5. Mentioned earlier that Takuma Sato is the reigning Indy 500 champion. This man did it in the Napa scheme, which, by the way, they've re-signed for next year with Andretti as well. This was last year's Indianapolis 500. The 100th running. And I think there was an element of shock there for young Alexander that he had done it. Michael Andretti, Brian Herter. What a day that was.
Well, that day was all about fuel conservation and making the most out of every drop. And the question with Alexander Rossi was, how fast is he actually on equal terms? And he's answered that question definitively this year, not just on road courses, not just on street circuits, but I've been most impressed with Alexander Rossi on the ovals this season. He's absolutely a top 5 oval racer now.
And I'll tell you what, there's no fuel savings
to go, plus 1 second, 3 to go.
at all going on right now. These two cats are going flat out, turning qualifying laps and streaking away from Ryan Hunter-Reay.
Fastest driver that last lap was actually Castro-Neves in the top 5. So Castro-Neves not giving up. He's 2 seconds back of Ryan Hunter-Reay, and he wants one more position as we see Pagano trying to get around Max Chilton here.
Again, championship contender, inside move, turn 1, wasn't quite close enough to Max to get it done. Chilton runs a little wide. This will give Simon the run, heading up into the S's.
Not sure Simon, he's on push to pass, but I just don't think he's got the downforce level to get it done on the Ganassi Honda car.
Pagano just burned his last second of push to pass with that move. Chilton with 4 seconds left. Meanwhile, Alexander Rossi has been forced to burn a ton of push to pass by Scott Dixon. They're now even. Remember, Rossi had a 40-second push to pass advantage. It's gone. It's even. 20 seconds left between the two of them.
Chilton runs wide there. Pagano's all over. That's a tough place to pass there. That's about 125-mile-an-hour corner.
And that was looming in the background. Carlos Munoz, both ABC supply cars for AJ Foyt Racing, Munoz and Daly.
That move of Pagano's was reminiscent of Newgarden on Will Power at Mid-Ohio. The duck left, or duck right, fade left.
Both of the guys are out of push to pass. None left for either of them. So now it's mano-a-mano, no assistance.
For this 200-mile race, you get 200 seconds of push to pass. How you deploy it, it's up to you.
Rossi's pulled away now from Dixon. He's got a little bit more breathing room, so nice little gap as we look out of Dixon's in-car. That's the biggest gap he's had.
Dixon with 13 seconds remaining, Rossi 18 seconds. So Dixon needs to make something big happen through these next 7 or 8 corners to give him a chance on the final lap. And I think Rossi's in a really good position, just managing the gap. He'll know from his team that he's got an advantage on push to pass.
Tell you what, you couldn't have a race that has had more drama than this for a championship leader. So we thought it was going to rain the whole race. We've had a nice, clean, dry race from the start. And man, big drama show today for the Penske team.
Enormous.
And let's make sure we mention the job Ryan Hunter-Reay's done today. Don't forget, it was only 2 weeks ago that he had a 130G crash at Pocono. He still has to be suffering from that massive impact as we take the white flag lap here.
1 to go. That is all less than 3.5 miles. And Alexander Rossi can get his first road course victory in Verizon IndyCar Series competition. He only has 1 win in IndyCar competition, but it's the biggest win you can have, the Indianapolis 500. What a day this has been, not only for Alexander Rossi and the Andretti Autosport team and the Napa 98 squad, because it hasn't all gone their way. They had those refueling issues, and Alexander had to come in off sequence very early in the stint. A caution came out, a really timely caution came out, which aided them, but nonetheless, he has had the speed all day long.
And Paul, I love how Alexander Rossi is finishing this lap with anger. He's not just coasting it in. He wants to prove the point. I belong at the front of this field everywhere we go.
Well, you can't afford to let up on the gas pedal. You can't back yourself up to a guy like Scott Dixon, because he will pounce no matter what lap it is. But a nice, clean finish to the race here for Alexander Rossi.
Alexander Rossi has woven together the perfect race today. It didn't look like it was going his way, but it is now. And the 25-year-old American gets his first road course win. Rossi wins at the Glen. How about that over Scott Dixon? This championship has tightened way up with one race to go. Max Chilton still holding Simon Pagenaud at bay. This has been an intriguing run. This is the fight for 8th. So, some valuable points elude Simon there. If only he could have got Chilton, but he still remains a championship contender. And the teammates for AJ Foyt come across the line together. Munoz 10th, Daly 11th. And while all of them at the front, including race winner Alexander Rossi, are enjoying this run home, good strong top 5 there, by the way, from Graham Rahal, you have to think about the guy at the back that is the championship leader right here, Joseph Newgarden. It all escaped him exiting pit lane with a hard crunch into the barrier, a damaged Penske Chevrolet, and he limps home and loses 28 points of advantage to lead this championship into the final day, the final race in 2 weeks' time, with just a 3-point advantage. Katie.
And Michael Andretti has to be so happy now that you just re-signed Alexander Rossi for several more years. Just 2 years with you, though, Michael. From him, as far as results, possibly a championship soon?
Well, that's our plan.
It's a very happy Michael Andretti down here, Lee.
Well, guess what, Katie? He is in 6th. Him being Alexander Rossi, mathematically, Alexander could still win this 2017 championship. Countdown clock continues, less than 2.5 hours until Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series racing. It's the Southern 500. It's the throwback weekend. Lots of cool paint schemes and dedications to heroes of the past, and that's coming your way in less than 2.5 hours. It is time to begin the celebrations here at Watkins Glen. And how about this story that's developing for young American Alexander Rossi? He won for Andretti at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He's now won for Andretti at Watkins Glen, Jan.
Yes, he has. And of course, the crew douses him before he's even fully out of the car, recognizing the photographers, recognizing the crew. And one of my thoughts initially is when you look at the box score today, you'll see that Alexander Rossi started on the pole and won this race, but this was much more about that.
We look forward to seeing how high he can climb in the championship in 2 weeks' time out in California. Not done yet here at the Glen. Stick around.
Welcome back to Watkins Glen, where Alexander Rossi has won for the 2nd time in his career after the Indianapolis 500 as a rookie. He pretty much dominates today on the road course.
Restarts, I was losing a lot of positions, but we had a lot of pace in the car despite that, and still salvage a 9th, which obviously we're in the hunt for the championship in Sonoma. So it's a good track for us. We had a great weekend last year. Everything's possible.
3 in front of
it. All just goes into the melting pot of how interesting it is to head to Sonoma in 2 weeks' time. And look at the recent run of results, of good results, from today's race winner, Alexander Rossi, 2nd in Toronto, just outside the top 5 in Mid-Ohio, on the podium in Pocono, 6th last week in Gateway, and the winner here in Watkins Glen. And Alexander Rossi mathematically puts himself in the championship hunt. The race to win the championship and to get your hands on the Astor Cup. Will Power knows what that's like. In fact, many of this year's championship contenders know exactly that feeling. So too does Simon Pagenaud as the reigning champ. Unfortunately, after 20 years, a title has eluded Helio Castro-Neves. Maybe this could be his year. Scott Dixon has touched that trophy 4 times in his illustrious career. And then Joseph Newgarden is trying to get his first. Now with this Championship 5, add today's race winner, Alexander Rossi, to that. 6 in the mix, heading out west to Sonoma in 2 weeks' time. Let's show you the championship points and let's show you why those 6 guys are all in contention. Again, the 31-point advantage evaporated today for Joseph Newgarden to just 3.
It's going to be amazing at Sonoma. Joseph Newgarden, I like the fact that he wasn't beating himself up after a huge mistake today. He's already thinking about next weekend, and he's going to be going for it there. And of course, Scott Dixon is going to be a force for sure.
Well, we keep talking about it all year. Scott Dixon is the lone Ganassi guy trying to do it on his own. Joseph Newgarden made a critical mistake racing with his teammate, who could have arguably cut him some slack right here, getting out of the pits. Will Power shoots by. He's racing with his teammate. He locks it up and makes that mistake.
And then the hit from, watch this, watch the car to the right. This is Sebastian Bourdais. Nowhere to go. Right into the back of Joseph Newgarden. The key point of this race that changed the complexion of this championship heading to the season finale. And for the 12th year in succession, it will be decided at the final race.
Well, and as we look at Alexander Rossi, think about what a rejuvenated Andretti Autosport is going to look like next season. You know Penske's going to be back with at least 3 cars. Ganassi potentially focusing in. So it's going to finish strong in 2017, but I'm just as excited for next season.
And what a day for Honda today. Coming home 1, 2, 3. First Chevy, Castro-Neves, Graham Rahal, then Will Power.
Solid runs for Charlie Kimball and Max Chilton. They needed good results to finish off the year strong. And Carlos Munoz and Connor Daly, I know it's 10th and 11th, but for that AJ Foyt team, I think this was their best road course of the season.
And they're building momentum.
They are.
You think about Gateway and the recent races. Those 2 youngsters for the legend, AJ Foyt, are really starting to get some momentum here late in the season.
Joseph Newgarden all the way down in 18th. That's his worst finish since Texas when he crashed, trying to go for a big move at the end of the race. So those have been his 2 races where he's made a mistake. It's going to make for one heck of a race next week.
All right, Paul Tracy, Townsend Bell's going to get out his rather thick wallet and give you $1,000. Who would you put it on heading to Sonoma?
Oh, I don't even want to say. A four-way fight. I don't even, I got to think about it.
Oh,
I can't even
quit
say.
soft pedaling it. I'm going to give you Scott Dixon. Come on, 3 points out, going to Sonoma, 4-time champion.
You're the guy, last week you said he had no chance. He was out of it
last week. That was last week, my friend. You pick somebody.
I'm going to go Joseph.
Okay, there you have it. Paul Tracy, Joseph Newgarden, Townsend Bell, Scott Dixon. Who do you think at home? It doesn't really matter because it's going to be decided in 2 weeks' time. Sonoma Raceway, California, right here on your home of motorsport. That does it. 2 parts of this triple-header day are complete. Formula One's done, IndyCar's done. Up next, it's NASCAR America from Darlington, followed by the NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series Southern 500. It's the throwback weekend. Can't wait for it. What a day we've got here for you on NBCSN. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time for the championship decider, the GoPro Grand Prix of Sonoma, Sunday, September 17 at 6:30 Eastern. On behalf of the entire team, thanks for watching IndyCar on NBCSN.